I stopped believing in loyalty the day I saw a friend smile at me while holding the knife meant for my back. It wasn't the betrayal that destroyed me, it was how natural it looked on them, how effortlessly they wore my trust like a costume. I've learned that people don't change when they betray you. They reveal who they were all along. Now, I watch the world differently, no longer looking for allies, but studying the quiet movements in the background. And in that silence, I've realized something. There is no such thing as a friend. Only temporary alignments, shifting with the winds of self-interest. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's strange how the most important moments of your life rarely arrive with grand gestures or dramatic thunder. Sometimes, they slip in quietly, wearing the disguise of something ordinary. That night was like any other. A table between us, glasses catching the dim light, the air rich with the smell of cheap whiskey and the smoke of a half-burned cigarette. Laughter drifted between us, familiar, easy, unguarded. Or so I thought. I remember leaning back in my chair, watching them speak, the sound of their voice mixing with the clinking of glasses around us. And then I saw it. It was nothing more than a flicker. A brief, almost imperceptible shift in their expression, the way the corner of their mouth tightened, the way their eyes momentarily lost their warmth. In that fragment of a second, I saw something that didn't belong there, a calculation. A silent measurement of me, my worth, my place in their life. It was as if I had been reduced to a number on a ledger they kept in their mind. I froze, my smile still on my lips, but something deep inside me began to turn to stone. I replayed the moment in my head as the night carried on, their voice continuing like nothing had happened. My own laughter felt hollow now, a performance I hadn't realized I was giving. Every story they told, every time their hand tapped the table for emphasis, I kept wondering, how long had they been seeing me like this? How long had I been mistaken about what we were? It wasn't distrust that filled me, not yet. It was clarity, cold and sharp, cutting through the haze of comfort I'd wrapped around us for years. The realization wasn't violent. It was slow, deliberate, the way fire eats the edge of a photograph. First, the corners curl inward, the colors dim, the faces distort, and yet, for a moment, the image still holds. That's how I saw our friendship now, still there, still recognizable, but already dead at the edges. I kept staring at them, as if I could catch another glimpse of that hidden ledger, as if I could see the exact line where my value had been adjusted. But they were careful now, too careful, as though they sensed the shift in me and worked to cover it. I thought about the years before this night, the nights we had stood side by side against the world, the secrets exchanged in whispers, the way their name in my phone had once meant safety. I remembered the kind of trust that lets you sleep deeply, knowing someone else is watching your back. And I realized, with a bitterness that almost tasted sweet, that this had never been trust, it had been convenience. We had been useful to each other, and I had mistaken that usefulness for love, for loyalty, for something unbreakable. The rest of the evening blurred. I spoke when expected, laughed when it was appropriate, but my mind was elsewhere, tracing the outlines of this new understanding. I began to notice things I had ignored before, the way their compliments came only when they benefited from them, the way they always seemed to keep one foot out the door of any shared moment. I wondered how many of my memories were real, and how many were illusions I had painted over the cracks. When I left that night, the city air was cold enough to sting. I walked alone, my breath visible in the streetlights, my hands deep in my pockets. I didn't feel betrayed. Betrayal implies a sudden break, a sharp fracture. This was quieter. This was a door I didn't realize had been closing until I heard the click of the lock. I understood then that I hadn't lost a friend. That person, the one I thought I knew, had never truly been there to begin with. What I lost was the illusion I had built, the belief that there was something sacred between us. I reached my door, and in the reflection of the dark window, I caught my own eyes. There was something in them that hadn't been there before, not sadness, not anger, but distance. A cold acceptance that from this night forward, things would never be the same. I lit a cigarette, even though I had quit months ago, and watched the smoke curl upward, vanishing into nothing. That's what our friendship felt like now. Something that had shape, weight, and presence. Until suddenly, it didn't. That was the night I stopped believing in the permanence of people. And that was the night the photograph of us finished burning, leaving nothing but ash. I used to believe loyalty was beyond price. That it was one of those rare human virtues untouched by greed, temptation, or fear. I thought it lived somewhere sacred, untouchable, untarnished. That when someone gave it to you, It was a vow carved in stone. I held that belief close, like a talisman against the coldness of the world. And then, I lived long enough to see it sold. Not always in grand betrayals, not always for fortunes or life-changing rewards. No, more often for something much smaller. A promotion. A fleeting chance to be closer to someone they secretly desired. A single whispered rumor that promised them belonging in another circle. I learned that loyalty can be traded away for things so trivial they don't even leave a mark on the skin. I've watched people I would have bled for measure my worth against their next opportunity. I've watched the scale tip, not with a weight of gold, but with something lighter, something almost laughable. Scraps of validation. A nod from the right person. A temporary sense of importance. And I can't even bring myself to hate them for it. Hate implies I expected more. What I feel now is different. It's quieter. It's the cold recognition that loyalty has never been free. It's always been a transaction, an exchange dressed in the costume of devotion. We only pretend it's pure because the truth is too sharp to hold in the hand. The moment I understood this, the world shifted. I started looking at relationships, every one of them, as balances of power and benefit. It wasn't cynicism. It was clarity. Loyalty doesn't exist in a vacuum. It survives only as long as the exchange remains favorable. As long as the cost of staying true is less than the reward for leaving, the illusion holds. But when the scales tilt, even by a fraction, people show their real price. And I've learned that most prices are insultingly low. Sometimes I think about the way a coin feels in the palm. Cold. Smooth. Impersonal. It doesn't care who holds it. It doesn't remember where it's been. It only waits to be passed along. Traded, used. That's what loyalty feels like now in my mind. Not a vow, not a virtue, but currency. People keep it only as long as it serves them. When something shinier comes along, they let it go without hesitation. And the part that still unsettles me is how naturally they do it, how they don't even see themselves as betrayers. They tell themselves stories, it's just business. I had no choice. It's for the best. And maybe they believe it. Maybe that's the only way they can sleep at night. I've sat in rooms where people swore they would stand by me, their voices steady, their eyes locked on mine, and then watched those same eyes drift away when the right hand reached for them. I've seen loyalty evaporate faster than smoke when the wind shifts. And over time, I stopped trying to hold it in my grasp. Because loyalty, like smoke, isn't meant to be held. It's meant to be watched, carefully, so you know which way it's drifting before it disappears. The hardest part is remembering the times I was blind to this truth. The times I poured myself into protecting someone who was already calculating the exit. I can still see their faces, not when they left, but in the days before, when they smiled at me with that faint distance, as if they were already halfway gone. Back then, I didn't recognize it. Now I do. Now I can see the invisible scales in their minds, weighing my worth against what they think they can gain without me. And the worst part? They always think they're the ones making the clever choice. They never see what they've really lost. So I no longer ask for loyalty. I observe it. I take it for what it is, a temporary alignment of interest, a coin that will inevitably pass to another hand. It doesn't hurt anymore when it's spent. Because I know it's not personal. It's not about me. It's about the currency of self-interest, and in that economy, no one is rich for long. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I take a coin from my pocket and press it into my palm. I close my hand around it until my knuckles whiten. I imagine it as the loyalty I've given and received in my life, cold, impersonal, waiting to be spent. And I wonder how many times I've been the one to hand it away, not realizing that once it leaves my hand, it never truly returns. There's a moment in every connection, friendship, love, alliance, when the weighing begins. Most never notice it. It's invisible, soundless, stripped of any ceremony. People don't look you in the eye and say, "I've started calculating your worth." They don't hold meetings or sign documents. They do it in the quiet, in the space between conversations, when they think you're not watching. And if you've lived long enough, you start to feel it. I've been in rooms where my name was being measured against numbers I would never see. The air would be warm, the wine smooth, the laughter flowing, and yet underneath I could feel the arithmetic. Their smiles would hold a fraction too long, their eyes darting for a split second to someone else before coming back to me. They were comparing, adding, subtracting, weighing what I gave them against what they believed they could gain without me. I could almost hear the scale creak in the silence between their words. It's a strange kind of death, being demoted in someone's private hierarchy. There's no warning, no declaration, no final conversation. One day, you're at the center of their trust, their first call in a storm, and the next you're somewhere further down in the background, kept warm in a drawer for when you're useful again. They don't announce it. They don't owe you that much. They simply begin to withhold. A little less laughter. A little less time. A little less truth. I've learned to recognize the signs. The pause before they answer a question they would have once met with honesty. The sudden formality in their tone. The way they stop asking for your opinion on things that matter to them. These are not mistakes. These are decisions. And every decision comes from the same invisible ledger they keep, one you'll never be allowed to touch. For a long time, I fought against this. I thought if I gave more, they would stop calculating. I thought loyalty, generosity, and presence could outweigh ambition or greed. But the truth is, the moment the counting starts, the bond is already weakening. People don't start measuring what they don't intend to sell. Once they've started looking for your price, it's only a matter of time before they find it. The silence becomes its own language. Every unanswered call is a decimal point shifting in their head. Every postponed meeting is a number being moved from one column to another. I used to take it personally. I used to think it meant I had failed them somehow. But now I understand, it's simply the nature of people to keep score, to ask themselves what they're getting for what they're giving. They don't always mean it as cruelty. In their minds, it's survival. Still, that doesn't make it less cold. There's a violence in this kind of quiet, not the sharp pain of a knife, but the slow chill of frost spreading through the walls of a house. You don't notice it at first. You keep walking through the rooms, lighting fires, telling yourself the warmth will last. Until one morning, you wake up, and the air bites at your skin. You see your breath in the dim light, and you realize the fires have been dying for a while. What unsettles me most is that sometimes, they keep the mask on even after they've done the math. They'll still invite you, still send messages, still pretend nothing has changed, because in their mind, you might still be useful later. You've become a contingency, an option kept in reserve. And they know if they cut you off completely, they might lose access to whatever value you once gave them. So they ration their presence, giving you just enough to keep you from walking away, while quietly searching for a better investment. I've sat in those moments, glass in hand, the sound of someone's voice spilling over me while my mind drifted to the ledger I couldn't see. I would picture it, columns of gains and losses, my name at the top, the ink still wet. I would wonder if the numbers were already too low to recover. And more often than not, I knew the answer before the conversation was over. Over time, I've stopped pretending to be blind to it. Now, when I sense the calculations starting, I simply watch. I let them keep their silent ledger, because I have one of my own. I listen to the pauses, I note the absences, I weigh their worth against the cost of keeping them close. And when the math no longer adds up, I leave before they do. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that once someone starts counting, they've already decided what you're worth. They're just waiting for the right moment to cash you out. The last betrayal didn't shatter me. It didn't leave me gasping for air or pacing through the night, trying to piece together the moment everything went wrong. There was no storm inside me, no breaking of glass. Just a quiet confirmation of something I'd already known. The truth had been pacing at the edge of my awareness for weeks, maybe months, wearing the same face I had once trusted. I had felt it in the spaces between our words, in the way their eyes started to search for something beyond me. Betrayal rarely arrives unannounced. It's more like a tide you watch creeping in, inch by inch, until the cold water is already around your ankles. I had seen the signs. They weren't obvious, at least not to anyone who still wanted to believe. But belief had already begun to slip through my fingers. There was the subtle distance at first, like a door left slightly ajar in a room we once kept sealed. Then came the cautious phrasing, the way their sentences grew careful, rehearsed, as though they were speaking in a language that could be overheard. And finally, the most telling sign, they stopped sharing certain truths with me. Not all at once. Just enough for me to notice the silence where their confessions used to be. The human heart is strange. It can sense the end before it arrives, and sometimes it grieves in advance, as if to protect itself from the sharpness of the final blow. I think that's what I did. Somewhere deep inside, I had already buried them long before their betrayal took form. I had already written the eulogy in my mind, spoken the last words in an empty room, and closed the door on a chapter they thought was still unfolding. By the time they acted, I had already let them go. When it finally happened, it was almost clinical. No raised voice. No confrontation. Just the moment itself, clean, precise, inevitable. Like a clock striking midnight, it marked the passage from one state of being to another. 1 second they were someone I once trusted, and the next, they were simply a stranger who knew too much about me. I didn't flinch. I didn't even speak. I just took note, like an observer watching the final scene of a play they had read long before it was performed. What surprised me wasn't the act itself, but the absence of pain. There was a time when their betrayal would have set me on fire. I would have replayed every conversation, searching for the turning point. I would have begged myself for answers, cursed myself for not seeing it sooner. But this time, there was only the stillness of recognition. The same stillness you feel when you're standing in the middle of a winter field, knowing the snow will keep falling whether you move or not. They tried to explain themselves, of course. They always do. Betrayers are rarely content to just leave. They want to write the story in a way that absolves them. They spoke about timing, about circumstances, about things they couldn't control. I let them talk. Every word they spoke was just a thread unraveling from a cloth I no longer needed to wear. By the time they were finished, there was nothing left between us. No warmth, no rage, no need for understanding. I walked away without ceremony. There were no parting words, no demand for truth. Because I had already taken the only truth that mattered, that the betrayal had been growing quietly all along, and I had been its witness. My absence of reaction wasn't strength. It was simply the acceptance that the fire had burned out long before they noticed the smoke. Sometimes late at night I think about them, not in longing but in study. I replay the subtle shifts, the quiet absences, the moments they thought I didn't notice. I treat them like constellations, each star a sign I once ignored, now connected into a pattern that tells the whole story. And I wonder how many others I have missed before. How many betrayals began with a silence I mistook for peace. In the end, their leaving didn't carve a wound. It confirmed one. And maybe that's the only mercy betrayal has to offer. When it's slow enough, you have time to bleed out before the knife even touches you. There is a strange kind of violence in watching someone you once trusted turn into a stranger before your eyes. No argument. No explosion. Just a slow unspooling of the thread that once tied you together. Their face remains the same, every feature intact, but something beneath it begins to shift. The way they speak changes. Fewer details, fewer shared jokes, fewer invitations into the quiet spaces where friendship used to live. You still know their voice, but it no longer belongs to you. It's an erosion you can't measure in days, only in moments. The pauses where laughter used to be. The sudden way their eyes wander when you speak. The small, unacknowledged distance that grows in the spaces between your footsteps. I've walked beside men who once swore they'd stand with me until the end. Men who would have bled for me without hesitation. And yet, I've seen those same men slowly shift their gaze to another horizon, one where I no longer stand. The change doesn't come all at once. It arrives like a shadow stretching across the floor, imperceptible at first, until you realize you've been standing in darkness for a while. You tell yourself it's nothing. That life gets busy. That bonds stretch but don't break. But deep down, you feel it. That cold recognition that the man beside you is already somewhere else in his mind, making plans that no longer include you. There is no betrayal in this, not the kind that leaves blood on the floor. It's quieter, cleaner, more like the way a photograph fades when left too long in the sun. The edges blur, the colors drain, until one day you're looking at a face you recognize but can't quite remember how it felt to stand beside. I used to believe in permanent allies. I believed loyalty was a fixed thing, like stone. I thought if you went through enough with a man, fought the same battles, took the same hits, you built something unshakable. I thought the bond became part of your blood. But blood dries. And alliances are not written in it. They are written in the shifting sand of mutual need. That was the hardest truth to swallow, that there is no such thing as a permanent ally. There are only people whose interests happen to align with yours for a time. When those interests change, so does their loyalty. The same man who once fought beside you will hand you over without malice, not because he wishes you harm, but because you no longer fit into the world he's building for himself. The first time I saw it happen, I fought against it. I tried to remind them of the nights we stood shoulder to shoulder, the weight we carried together, the times I shielded them from the fire. But memories are not currency. They don't buy loyalty. And they certainly don't stop the drift. You cannot make someone stay in a war they no longer believe in. So I learned to watch for the signs. The slight narrowing of their words. The way they stop asking questions about your life. The absence of laughter where there used to be ease. And when I see it now, I do not try to stop it. I let the distance grow. I let them walk into their new alignment without chasing them. Because here's the truth. Forcing someone to remain your ally is the quickest way to turn them into your enemy. And I would rather let a man become a stranger than watch him become something worse. Still, there is a grief in it. A quiet one. Not the sharp grief of betrayal, but the dull ache of losing something you thought would be permanent. You pass each other in the street, maybe even exchange a few words, and it's all polite. But behind the politeness is the knowledge that you are both keeping count of the distance, of the years, of the things left unsaid. And yet, I have come to accept it. People leave, even when they stay. The man you knew 2 years ago is gone, replaced by someone else wearing his face. And maybe you have changed too. Maybe you are a stranger to him as well. Now, when an ally begins to drift, I don't hold them tighter. I simply adjust my stance. I remind myself that alliances are not built on love or loyalty, but on timing. And timing is the one thing you can never control. I don't mourn the loss of friends anymore. Not in the way I used to. There are no midnight calls, no desperate explanations, no trembling demands for the truth. When a bond dies, I don't bury it with a funeral. I bury it in silence. I let the dirt fall over it without ceremony, without witnesses, without a headstone. Once, I would have torn myself apart asking why. I would have dissected every word, every gesture, every unreturned call, looking for the point where the thread snapped. But I don't ask anymore. Because the answer is always the same. People will choose themselves. Every time. And maybe that isn't cruelty. Maybe it's survival. We live in a world where everyone is walking their own narrow bridge, where the weight they carry feels unbearable to them, even if it looks light to you. When the bridge sways, they don't think about who's behind them. They think about reaching the other side. If that means letting go of your hand, they will. Not out of malice. Out of instinct. I've learned to accept that. With the same detachment I have for the turning of seasons. When winter comes, I don't resent the cold. I don't curse the sky for withholding warmth. I simply adjust my coat. I stack wood. I close the windows. I prepare myself to endure. This is not bitterness. Bitterness wants revenge. I want nothing. I've stopped expecting permanence from people. I've stopped holding on to the fantasy that loyalty is a fixed thing. I take what is given, for as long as it's given, and when it's gone, I don't chase it. I don't knock on closed doors. I don't stand in the rain waiting for someone to come back. The first time I did this, it felt like death. The second time, it felt like amputation. Now, it feels like habit. I can still remember the faces of those I've buried in my mind. The ones who once swore they'd stand with me until the end. The ones who once knew my voice better than I knew it myself. They still exist in the world somewhere, breathing the same air, seeing the same sun. But in my life, they are gone. And I've learned that's enough. I don't need their absence explained. I don't need their reasons written out in careful words. I don't even need their apologies. Because here's the truth, a person's absence is their answer. I've stopped confusing my role in someone's story with permanence. Sometimes you're the center of their life. Sometimes you're a background figure who fades before the credits roll. And sometimes you're just a chapter they skip when retelling their own history. It doesn't matter anymore. This acceptance didn't come all at once. It was forged in the slow, grinding disappointments that pile up over years. It was shaped by the quiet endings, the ones no one talks about because they don't look like endings at all. Now, when someone drifts away, I don't reach for them. I simply watch the tide pull them further, until they disappear over the horizon. And when they do, I turn back to the shore. The cold no longer frightens me. It no longer feels like punishment. It feels like nature. It feels like the world moving as it always has. So I adjust my coat. And I keep walking. I walk alone now. Not in bitterness. Not in exile. But in clarity. There's a kind of stillness that comes when you stop expecting the world to be anything but what it is. I watch people moving through their lives, trading favors, forging alliances, breaking them as easily as they were made. To them, this is the rhythm of survival. To me, it is simply the sound of the tide. I no longer ask who will stay. I only watch the patterns. The ones who flatter you in public, then fade in private. The ones who swear loyalty until a better offer whispers in their ear. The ones who need you only until their hands are free. Every smile, every handshake, every raised glass, I see them for what they are. Moments. Nothing more. It isn't cynicism. It's accuracy. Once, I believed in permanence. I believed that bonds could be carved into stone. That loyalty was something you could lock away, safe from weather and time. But I learned the truth in the quietest way possible, not in an argument, not in betrayal's explosion, but in a room filled with laughter. It was there in that warmth that I saw it, a shadow moving behind a friend's smile. A calculation in their eyes that didn't match their words. It was small, almost invisible. But it was enough. In that moment, something inside me shifted. That was the day my illusions died. And once you bury an illusion, you never resurrect it. Since then, I've been watching the shadows more than the faces. I've learned that the truth of a person isn't in the words they speak. It's in the flicker in their gaze when they think you're not looking. It's in the slight pause before they answer. It's in what they don't say. I've seen men toast to brotherhood with one hand, while holding a blade in the other. I've seen women speak of loyalty while planting seeds of doubt in the next room. I've seen alliances built in a single night and burned by morning. None of it shocks me anymore. There's a freedom in this kind of knowing. When you stop demanding permanence, you stop fearing loss. When you see everything as temporary, betrayal becomes less of a wound and more of a clock striking its hour. I let them have their illusions. If they need to believe in forever, let them. If they need to think their bonds are unbreakable, let them. I won't be the one to take that comfort from them. But I don't share in it. My world is smaller now. Quieter. I move through it like a shadow myself, listening more than speaking, learning more than trusting. I keep my own counsel. I carry my own weight. It's not loneliness. It's precision. Because when you walk alone, you see everything. The currents of greed that pull people under. The tides of ambition that carry them away. The small betrayals that no one else notices, until they become big enough to swallow the room. I've learned that most people are not malicious by nature. They are simply loyal to their own survival first. And when that survival demands your absence, they won't hesitate. So I don't hesitate either. When it's time to part ways, I do it without ceremony, without blame, without lingering at the door. And I keep walking. Through the noise, through the shifting alliances, through the endless theater of promises. My footsteps are steady, my eyes always scanning the edges of the stage. Because I know where the real story is told. It's never in the center. It's in the shadows, moving just out of sight. And that is where I will always be. Watching.